Although human beings have been around for hundreds of thousands of years, what we'd recognize as human civilization didn't appear until close to the year 7000 BCE, when humans started domesticating plants and animals and inhabiting seasonal settlements. Gradually, those settlements grew into full-blown civilizations, many of which came together much longer ago than you may have realized.
Today we are going to take a journey through a history of civilization. Okay, time to hit the dating scene. The carbon dating scene, that is.
Around 10,000 years BCE, humanity entered what's now known as the Neolithic or New Stone Age era, which lasted for around 5,000 to 8,000 years. While the term humans encompassed a few different species in the earlier Paleolithic era, by the Neolithic, we're only talking about our own folks.
Good old Homo sapien sapiens.
Beyond more magazine-friendly, non-sloping foreheads, the Neolithic period brought a lot more changes as well, including the first farming settlements, widespread use of metal tools in addition to stone, and the first efforts at pottery. Known civilizations from this point in history include Çatalhöyük, an early settlement in modern-day Turkey. It's likely this spot was chosen for a city due to its proximity to a channel of the Çarşamba River. The combination of fresh water and ground made of alluvial clay would have made this spot favorable for early attempts at agriculture. At its height, the population of Çatalhöyük was probably between 5,000 and 7,000 people, who were living in a society that was notably communal and egalitarian by modern-day standards.
That's less people than attended the first WrestleMania.
So while it wasn't quite a bustling metropolis, it was still pretty impressive for such an early community. Homes were made of mud brick and were clustered together in a honeycomb design. No one lived in a fancier mansion than their neighbors either. All the homes were basically identical.
So nobody lived in the fanciest McMansion on the block.
Fascinatingly, when upgrading buildings, rather than demolishing the old structures, new ones were simply built on top of them. Eventually, the city became a large mound constructed atop prior cities, rising up from the ground. Forming around 7000 BCE, the Ain Ghazal civilization of present-day Jordan was clustered near what is today the bustling city of Amman. It's believed Ain Ghazal was composed of over 3,000 people, which was large enough to make it one of the world's most populated cities of its era. Though not much is known about the people who lived in Ain Ghazal, around 15 large-scale statues and busts have survived, some of which are currently on display. The statues were created by modeling moist, malleable limestone plaster around a reed core, fashioned entirely with plants found along the banks of the Zaka River. As the reeds decayed over millennia, the hard plaster shells have largely survived. While today the statues all appear bald, they probably also originally had wigs. It's likely they were crafted for some kind of burial ritual and were designed to be entombed with their owners. But further specifics about their use, and Ain Ghazal culture more generally, have been lost to time.
So the least we could do is get those guys some new wigs. Their heads have been naked for far too long.
The Norte Chico, the earliest known civilization in the Americas, formed during the Bronze Age. They lived along the north-central coast of what is today Peru, starting around 3100 BCE. The name Norte Chico actually refers to as many as 30 population centers in and around this area. The civilization existed along the banks of 3 rivers, the Fortaleza, the Pativilca, and the Supe. No pottery or visual art from the Norte Chico era has survived, but archaeologists have discovered some of their buildings and architecture, including sunken circular plazas and platform mounds that likely once housed buildings or other communal spaces. Archaeological discoveries also suggest that people living in the area had textile technology, possibly wearing cotton clothes and fashioning fishing nets from cloth, as well as a polytheistic religion. Perhaps the most famous Bronze Age site, Mesopotamia became a significant population center around 3500 BCE and remained a vital cluster of civilization through 500 BCE.
It's also a popular plot point for at least 2 Ghostbusters movies.
The area located between the Tigris and Euphrates River in what's today Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Syria was home to multiple distinct societies over the years, including the Akkadians, the Sumerians, the Assyrians, and the Babylonians.
The area was a hive of activity due to its beautiful green lands. We now refer to this area as the Fertile Crescent, and it has been aptly named the cradle of civilization.
The area flourished independently until it was conquered by the First Persian Empire. More invaders followed, including Alexander the Great, the Parthian Empire, and ultimately, the Romans. The civilizations that occupied Mesopotamia are responsible for a vast number of innovations and firsts in human history, including writing, early political systems, mathematics, and astronomy. But perhaps the region's largest leap forward came during the era of Babylonian rule, with the explosion of literature and libraries. Early Sumerian language was expressed as a complex logosyllabic script known as cuneiform, which took many years to learn and master, and was only understood by a small elite group within the population. During the Babylonian period, many Sumerian works were translated into a simpler form that more people could read and comprehend. Some literature written during the Babylonian era, including the Epic of Gilgamesh, which was translated from the original Sumerian, are still widely read today. The Harappan or Indus Valley people lived between 2200 and 1900 BCE in an area of South Asia that today stretches across Afghanistan, Pakistan, and northwest India. Their cities were particularly notable for elaborate urban planning, which included extensive drainage and water supply systems, as well as non-residential buildings designed for artisans and metallurgy. In other words, they had plumbing and industrial districts. It's believed as many as 5 million people might have occupied the Indus Valley at its height, an area larger than ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia, and more than 1,000 mature settlements have been discovered. Today, we refer to ancient Egypt as if it was just one society, but actually the term encompasses a variety of societies that dominated the Nile Valley, coalescing around 3100 BCE and extending all the way through antiquity until 300 AD by some accounts.
That's a pretty long run, like the Simpsons of the ancient world.
This includes both stable kingdoms and also intermediate periods of relative instability.
Yeah, exactly like the Simpsons.
Egypt was also periodically invaded by other peoples, including the Hyksos, the Libyans, the Nubians, the Assyrians, the Persians, and the Macedonians under Alexander the Great.
There's that guy again. Man, what was his problem?
For most modern people, the blanket term ancient Egypt is most closely associated with the Old Kingdom, stretching from around 2686 to 2181 BCE. A considerable increase in agricultural productivity led to a population boom, more centralization of the Egyptian government, and many great works, such as the construction of the pyramids at Giza and the Sphinx.
At this point, it's probably worth stopping and looking at the common factors which led to all these ancient civilizations springing up around the globe. Most of the globe was covered in snow, but the thin band around the center that we now know as the tropics was bursting with life. But what do all these civilizations have in common? What made humanity localize in these select few areas? Water. Egypt had the Nile, Mesopotamia had the Euphrates and Tigris, and Harappan people had the Indus. Yes, it was the fine silts of the floodplains that allowed for seasonal farming and cultivation of crops, and it was this that allowed civilization to flourish.
Historians typically date the passage of the Bronze Age into the Iron Age to around the 12th century BCE. While some prior civilizations had early forms of literature and writing, this is also the period when the historical record truly begins in earnest. And we have more primary sources to consult about life on Earth. Though the Greek islands had already been settled throughout the Neolithic and Bronze Age periods, what's thought of as classical antiquity, the culture we today associate with ancient Greece, started forming around the 8th century BCE, when Homer was first jotting down his famous epic poems. In those early drafts, Odysseus was named Todd.
But Todessy didn't quite have the same ring to it.
A rapidly growing population led some Greeks to spread out and form new colonies around southern Italy, Sicily, and Asia Minor. This in turn spread their culture and language throughout the Mediterranean. These colonies also experienced significant economic success in commerce and manufacturing, bringing Greece even more esteem and influence throughout the ancient world. The innovation of democratic rule in the city-state of Athens ushered in a golden age for Greek society, while the conquests of Macedonian leader
and special guest star Alexander the Great,
whose army spoke Greek, further spread their culture and ideas, leading into what's known as the Hellenistic period. Roman civilization initially formed as a kingdom along the river Tiber in central Italy, roughly in tandem with the rise of Greek influence, starting around 753 BCE. The final Roman king, Tarquinius Superbus, ruled until 509 BCE, when he was deposed and the First Roman Republic was established. This new democratically elected government would ultimately establish the Roman Empire and would come to control the majority of the Mediterranean world. Beginning in what is now present-day Iran in 550 BCE, the Achaemenid Empire, also known as the First Persian Empire, steadily grew and conquered surrounding societies. By around the year 500 BCE, it had expanded into the largest geographic empire the world had ever seen, spanning over 5.5 million square miles from Egypt in the west all the way to the Indus Valley in the east. Due to the vast amount of ground they needed to organize and manage, these early Persians made a number of key innovations, including road and postal systems and complex bureaucracies and infrastructure. They were also among the first civilizations to maintain a professional standing army for both defense and expansion. While Western discussions about the ancient world often focus exclusively on the Mediterranean, humans were forming early societies in the Americas at this time as well. The Olmecs lived in modern-day Mexico from around 1400 to 400 BCE. They developed a number of cultural practices and traditions that became hallmarks for future Central and South American societies, including ritual bloodletting and a popular ball game similar to modern-day racquetball.
Except way less dentists and overpaid lawyers played this version.
The Olmecs are also noted for their unique art style, which included colossal human head sculptures formed from basalt boulders. You know the ones we mean. The Maya civilization, meanwhile, flourished in South America, around the Yucatan Peninsula, from 2600 BCE all the way through the year 900 in the Common Era. And many of their impressive pyramids, also known as ziggurats, are still standing to this day.
Today we have touched on the history of civilization and looked at some of the most prosperous of ancient peoples. But we have only touched the tip. Go out. Take a look around your neighborhood. Ancient history is all around you. This has been a WTV production in association with Old Man Phil Entertainment and Bob Smith Industries Incorporated. If you got some bits you need to stick, a little dab or bab will do the trick. Happy Goodnice Day, you eggs. Keep it ultra. Catch you on the flip.